Hello, and welcome to Dad Reads with me, David. Now, today's story, you might remember I'm trying to do more classic stories, stories that were read to me when I was younger or I used to read when I was growing up. And this story kind of have played it on the channel already, but I thought you might like to hear the original, the classic. So, today's story is Cinderella. And it's written by, let's get the names, Amanda Askew and Marcella Hajindak. I apologise, Marcella, if that's pronounced, I've butchered your name. But yeah, shall we read it? Cinderella. Once upon a time, there lived an unhappy young girl. Her mother had died, and her father had married a widow with two daughters. Her stepmother doted on her own daughters. Nothing was too good for them. Dresses, shoes, parties, whatever they wanted. But for the poor, unhappy girl, there was nothing at all. Her dresses were her stepsister's hand-me-downs. Her dinner was nothing but scraps. Her day was filled with hard work. Only when evening came was she allowed to sit by the fire near the cinders. Everybody called her Cinderella. One day, beautiful new dresses arrived at the house. A ball was to be held at the palace and the stepsisters were invited. Cinderella didn't ask if she could go too. She knew very well what the answer would be. Instead, Cinderella began her chores. She washed the dishes, scrubbed the floors, and turned down the beds. I am so unhappy, she sighed. Suddenly, as Cinderella was all alone, a fairy appeared. Don't be alarmed, Cinderella, said the fairy. I am your fairy godmother. I know you'd love to go to the ball, and so you shall. But I'm dressed in rags, sighed Cinderella. The fairy godmother smiled. With a flick of her magic wand, Cinder found herself wearing the most beautiful dress she had ever seen. Cinderella was speechless. Now for your coach, said the fairy godmother. Bring me a pumpkin. The fairy godmother turned to the cat. Bring me 7 mice. Cinderella soon returned with the pumpkin, and the cat with the 7 mice. With a flick of her wand, the fairy godmother turned the pumpkin into a sparkling coach. Next, she turned the mice into 6 white horses and a coachman. Cinderella could hardly believe her eyes. There is one condition, said the fairy godmother. The magic will wear off on the last stroke of midnight, so you must be home by then. I will, thank you, fairy godmother, beamed Cinderella. Cinderella had a wonderful time at the ball, dancing with the prince himself. When she had heard the last stroke of midnight, without a word of goodbye, she slipped from the prince's arms and ran down the steps. As she ran, she lost one of her slippers. Still, away she fled and vanished into the night. The prince was now madly in love with her. He picked up the slipper and said to his ministers, Search everywhere for the girl whose foot this slipper fits. I shall never be happy until I find her. The ministers tried the slipper on every girl in the land, until only Cinderella was left. That awful and tidy girl simply cannot have been at the ball, snapped her stepmother. The prince ought to marry one of my 2 daughters. Can't you see how ugly Cinderella is? To everyone's amazement, the shoe fit perfectly. The fairy godmother appeared and waved her magic wand. In a flash, Cinderella was transformed. In an elegant dress, Cinderella shone with youth and beauty. Her stepmother and stepsisters gaped at her in amazement. The ministers had found the prince's love. Cinderella and the prince married the very next day and lived happily ever after. The end. Now that was a short one, but I think it's one of the best stories. And do you remember what story we read that was like that one? Yeah, Cinderella. So I read this one first, and it was kind of like a similar outcome, but I think it's a bit of a modern twist. But this Cinderella is the classic. So what did you think of that story? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and to like the video. Until next time, bye for now.